He rolled in what now? Keep watching to find out how we get all the poop, pee, and other unmentionable stains off of Dillon.
Howdy, and welcome to the Bar SC Ranch, where you will experience our journey of running a family business, caring for animals, and doing life together. Subscribe now and be inspired here at the Bar SC.
Hey guys, so I'm here in our wash rack with my horse Dillon, and as you can see, he's a little dirty. He's not as brightly colored as he normally would be. We're going to be bathing him today. We've got our tools assembled, so we're going to show you all about what we do to keep our horses clean so that they can be free from skin irritations, flies, and also for his case today, we're bathing him so that he'll be nice and clean for a show tomorrow. So let's keep watching and we're going to show you what we do to bathe our horses. So our first step when we're bathing our horse is to water them down, wash them down, make sure they're perfectly wet. And as we do that, we're going to start down here on Dillon's legs, because that, just like us getting into a pool, how we want to, step in slowly and get used to the water as we go, that's going to allow Dillon to get used to the water. We do have hot water out here at our wash rack. It's a very warm day though. Not super concerned with making the water very warm for him. We're going to make sure it's not freezing cold, but believe me, he does not want a warm bath today. It's nice and warm. But we're still going to start on the legs so that he can be used to it, because this big core area here on horses is always a really warm area of the horse, because this is where the digestion's happening and where a lot of the heat in the horse is being made. So before we move into this area and the back, they're always a little tender in the back. We want to make sure, the neck, the shoulder, down the legs, we start here and let them get used to the temperature of the water. So I'm going to start that with Dillon, get him all hosed off, get some of this sweat and mud off him that I can with the water, and then we'll move on to the soap. I want to get him wet behind his ears, on his forehead, and anywhere around his face. So with some horses we can use the hose for that and just run the water down their face. I have a very special horse. We don't do that with Dillon. He really doesn't like it. What he's thinking is that we're going to put water in his ears or in his eyes and things like that. And of course, if he thrashes his head around, we probably are. So in order to make this a really good experience for him and make my job a little bit easier, we use a sponge. So I've wet my sponge down. It's a little soapy, but not much. And then I'm going to take my sponge and just wipe in some of these areas where I wouldn't want to be spraying with the hose. So down around his face, in front of his ears. And you can see he kind of leans away from me. He's very touchy about his ears. That's a big thing with Dillon, is he doesn't like his ears being touched. But he and I have come a long way. We've gotten to the point now where he'll let me do this and we can get his face nice and clean. In between wiping, since I am wiping a lot of sweat off, I'm going to rinse my sponge a little bit more, get it a little wet again. Make sure I'm not just re-wiping a bunch of sweat back onto his face. What I can kind of do is squeeze the sponge, let the water run down. That doesn't bother him too much. We'll make sure to go over the eye, down the nose a little bit. No big deal. Some of the water, I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it's running off brown. But see, it's that ear. He's a little weird about the ear, so we go around it. We do what he wants us to do, which is take it nice and easy. Back here, I'll move his forelock out of the way. Hey. So when he is weird about his ears, we have some videos on desensitizing. That's some of the stuff we do with Dill. But I just make sure it's my hand. I can touch around your ears, just my hand. And this is what he does. I notice I'm not hurting his ear in the slightest, but I want to make sure that if I reach around those areas, like if I need to reach up here, no big deal. And on a normal day, it really is no big deal for him. But once we start bathing, he goes back into this state of, oh my God, you're going to put water in my ears. And we just take a few steps back, make it nice and easy for him. But I'm going to continue this on both sides, make sure we get his head and behind the ears nice and clean, and then we'll move on to the soap. So this is the soap that we're going to be using for Dillon. It's actually, if you look at the bottle, it's purple. And the reason we use purple shampoo, we don't do this for all horses, but if you've ever been familiar with someone who dyes their hair blonde and they're wanting to get they use a purple shampoo. And the same thing applies with horses. So Dillon is obviously white, and so he tends to roll, this is a little gross, but in pee or in dirt or things like that that would stain his really white coat. So this purpley shampoo, that's a little hard to see, you can zoom in on the bucket here if you want to see it. It's actually purple based, is going to help us take some of the yellow or brown or otherwise dirty tinges out of his coat and basically mask the fact that he's not actually 100% white because he's been playing in the dirt and with his friends. But this is going to help us get him nice and clean, and we'll show you the difference as we soap him up. So with the soap, I like to employ the same concept as you would for like car washing, which is I start up towards the top where in theory he's going to be a little bit cleaner, and then I work my way down to the areas around the feet where, let's be real, he's very dirty. And if anything, he's a little yellowish tinge down there. Now, as I'm bathing him, if I find any sections that are really overly stained, like maybe he rolled in poop last night and has a really big stain that's not going to come out with just a general soaping like this, I'm going to take my purple shampoo and put a little bit on my hand. So this is diluted in water. This is our purple shampoo diluted. But I'll actually use it undiluted in any areas where I need a little extra soap power to lift any of the stains that he might have. So all these little spots on him, that's part of his coat. Those aren't stains we're looking to get off. But down around his legs, you'll notice they tend to be a little bit more yellow because that's where he's going to be in the mud or in the dust or anything like that. Up here, he's a little cleaner. You know, under his saddle, he gets sweaty a lot under there. We've got a lot of stuff to take off under here. But otherwise, we're just going to make our way around little circles like this, making sure his whole body is covered in soap. And it's going to take us a good while because he's a big horse. Then we'll check back in and I'll show you what we do to rinse him and how we use a more concentrated form of the soap in order to get any hard stains off. So this is actually Dillon's first bath in about a year. And you know, at home you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's horse abuse. It's not. We actually do hose them down regularly if they sweat, or if they get a little grimy. We'll use just water and maybe a little bit of pressure behind the water, a little bit of scrubbing to get them clean and to get any sweat off so that way they don't attract flies or start getting a skin condition. But unless your horse already has like a skin condition, or if you're needing to go to a show like we are, there's really no reason to need to use soap. The soap is really helpful in getting a little bit of stain off of them and making them look really nice and pretty for our show. There's antifungal, antibacterial soaps if your horse is having any kind of an issue with their skin. But if they're not, then use some water, hose them down, make sure they're in good condition and they're very happy. The soap over time, horses don't secrete as much oil like we do. You think about us washing our hair regularly, also gets greasy. Horses don't get greasy like that. So there's no real reason to need to be removing that grease. And actually, if we bathe them too often and put soaps like this on them too often, their coat will start to dry out and get dull because it's not being replenished with the oils that it needs to stay hydrated and shiny and healthy. And that can actually cause issues with making your horses very itchy because their skin's drying out, their hair is drying out, and that could be a problem as well. So we don't want to do this more often than we have to, but when we do bathe them, we want to make sure it's nice and thorough and we get any spots where we might find a little something stuck to them. At the same time, we're looking him over for any kind of injuries. Maybe he got bitten in the pasture or something like that. Any time that we're working around our horses, grooming them, bathing them, we're checking to make sure there's no new dings, nothing on them that we might need to put a little medication on or keep an eye on. So as I'm soaping up near his head, like we were talking about earlier, he doesn't love the hose being run down his face. So thank you, Dillon. I want to be careful that I'm not putting soap in places that I'm going to find it very hard to remove it. If I cover his whole head in soap, and I think all horse people have been there at one point, cover his whole face in head in soap and find I can't get it off, now we have a problem of there's now dried soap sitting on him, or I have to pick a really big fight and attempt to spray him in the face with a hose. And I wouldn't want to be sprayed in the face with a hose either, so I totally see where he's coming from. But I need to make sure I don't put soap places that I'm not going to be able to get it back off thoroughly and completely, because it can dry on the coat and be a nuisance, either causing skin issues or attracting bugs and flies and things like that that'll cause further issues for the horse. So that's just something to keep in mind as I'm soaping up towards this front area. I'm not going to put it places I won't be able to rinse it back off. So something cool about Dillon, and not Dillon specifically, but horses of his color is technically gray, even though you look at him and, you know, I'd say, yeah, he's white. You know, it's a white horse. We call them gray because the skin underneath this white hair is actually black, or really, really dark gray. If he had a bunch of pink skin underneath his hair, then he could technically be called a white horse. But since he has this black skin, he's gray. And that's really apparent down on his legs. We run my little soapy thing over here to get it nice and wet. But on his legs, you can see there's a line of distinction here between this gray skin, and he actually has white skin down under here. So if he was a different colored horse, like a bay, where they're brown horses, he would actually have a little white sock. So he'd be brown everywhere else over this black haired section, or black skinned section, and he'd have a little white sock here where his skin is pink instead of dark gray or black. So something cool, and they'll actually use markings like this, even though they're not overly visible, you know, just by looking at the horse. They use markings like that to identify some gray horses, because when horses are born, gray horses, they actually are really, really, really dark gray, like almost black, kind of like a charcoal color. And then with time, they slowly turn white, almost completely white, maybe with a little bit of gray dappling. And then after that, they get these little spots. And that's just a typical pattern that gray horses follow. They don't all follow that exact pattern, but the big take home is that they change colors over the courses of their lives. So when Dillon was younger, he looked nothing like this. The same horse, but like almost a completely different color. So in order to track these horses and know what they are, you can't, you know, count the spots that are on him and say, well, he has 18 spots over here. Because at one point, Dillon actually had no spots whatsoever. His hair was completely white. And then as he has aged, he's gained all of these little, you know, colorful brown flecks that we actually call flea bites. No, he wasn't bitten by fleas, but I guess that's what it looked like to whomever named that, because they call them flea bites. So now that I've done the entire top half of Dillon, I'm going to start working on the legs. And what I do before working my way down is I add a little bit more purple shampoo. And you'll notice that as I am actually putting the soap on him, you'll see that it's actually coming on purple. So something to be careful of is you can't dye your horse purple, so we don't want to add too much purple. But the purple in the shampoo, now that it's a little more concentrated, will actually be able to work on the stains down here on his lower legs, where they're just not quite the same color as the rest of his body. And ideally, when we're done here, he should be just as white-haired throughout the entirety of his body, except for obviously his little brown spots. But all the parts of him that are supposed to be white should be white. So we're going to use a more concentrated version of this soap in order to hopefully obtain that all-over white coloring. So down around his heel here, something I'm checking for that has to do less so with getting him clean and more so with horse health is that horses can get something called mud fever, or any kind of a rash down in this area, because it's an area prone to holding a lot of dirt and moisture and wetness. And it's a very important thing to check back here and make sure it's nice and clean in this area, because we don't want our horse to have any kind of a weird hoof infection or bacterial skin issue down, I mean anywhere really, but this area is very prone to that sort of thing. So as I soap back here, I'm really feeling with that other hand to make sure there's nothing weird lurking in there that maybe I would need to treat with some kind of antifungal, antibacterial medication. So something I'm keeping an eye on when I'm working down around Dillon's legs is my own safety. Anytime we're working on horses, we're worried about our safety. But especially as I'm down here squatting near his back legs, if anything were to spook him and he were to jump sideways, he could end up on top of me. So I'm very aware of my surroundings right now. If someone were to come barreling in, I'd want to back up and get away from him, so that if he needed to move, he has that room to do so. But something else to keep an eye on is that where I'm putting my feet and where I'm putting my knees is not anywhere that he might accidentally step on me. You know, maybe he doesn't mean to, maybe he's not afraid, he's just kind of moving one leg and he happens to get on my foot. That could be a bad situation for me. Another thing is, while I work around him, I'm never down on both my knees. That does not put me in a good position to be able to move out of the way. I'm kind of stuck. You know, you certainly wouldn't want to be sitting down on your bottom, because think about how long it takes you to get out and move. You want to always be, I try and always squat, either with both knees off the ground, or every once in a while I'll put one knee down. As long as I'm ready to get up and move out of the way as fast as I need to make sure that I'm perfectly safe while working around my horse. So now that I've spent a long time covering him and myself in a bunch of soap and water, it's now time to rinse. And so I'm going to start rinsing up here at this highest point behind his ears and then work my way down. If I start over here and then I move up here, of course the soap's just going to run down and get right back into that area. It's less efficient. So we're going to start up here, and this is that area he's a little nervous about getting soap in his ears, so I'm going to start slow, get the soap to start running down away from that direction, and then work my way back. We're going to finish with the tail once we've unsoaped both sides of him, because the tail I want to leave soaking in that purple solution for as long as possible. Not so long that we dye the tail purple, but long enough that we remove the yellow, and it's a little bit of a fine balance, but I think we're gonna get it today. Or I'm gonna have a purple tail. Either way, win-win for me. I like purple, it's fine. But I'm gonna start with the rinsing. Thanks so much for watching. We hope that you guys learned a whole bunch about horse bathing and what it takes to get a horse like Dillon looking this shiny and clean and white and ready for a show. Please keep watching for future videos, and we'll show you what we do to braid our horses and how the show goes with Dillon, Maddie, Willie, and I.
If you enjoyed this video, we'd love to hear from you. Like and subscribe and leave us a comment about what you might like to see in future episodes. We'll see ya back on the ranch.